At the end of the Hedge Knight, Sir Duncan the Tall is in a bad spot. After Dunk defended Tanzel from Aerion, he is facing losing a hand and a foot for striking someone of royal blood. He is able to use his position as a knight to force his trial to be a trial by combat. However, Aerion counters this by demanding that the trial by combat be specifically a trial by 7. He states that the reason he does this is so that the crimes against his brother can be tried as well at the same time, but the reality is that it's for two other reasons. 1. Dunk's fighting prowess is an entirely unknown entity at the tournament, as no one at the tournament has encountered Dunk before. But unarmed and one-on-one, Dunk was able to beat Aerion. But if Aerion can fight with the King's Guard by his side, he is more protected and thus more likely to win. And 2, since once again Dunk doesn't know anyone at the tourney, he probably won't be able to find 6 knights to fight alongside him, and thus will be judged guilty without even needing to fight. But, as Baylor states, this is where Aerion erred, as Dunk is able to get 6 knights to fight alongside him, and in doing so, he may have accidentally appeased the 7 gods by finding a knight that is a champion of each god. So exactly who are the 7? The 7 are the primary religious deities of Westeros. While they are mentioned a lot in passing in the books, there isn't really one time when the religion is looked into in great detail. So from what I can piece together across the series, the 7 are 7 aspects of one god. 3 masculine, 3 feminine, and 1 neutral. Each of the 7 embodies a primary ideal of the religion and a secondary anthropomorphic characteristic to help people identify with each of them. For each of the gods, these are as follows. The Father. He embodies justice and is represented by patrilineal relationships. The Mother. She is one of the more difficult gods to pin down, as she sometimes embodies the ideals of protecting the innocent, which other times is the domain of the maiden, and sometimes she represents fertility. But the main ideals I think she embodies, and the ones that we will be using for this video, are that of life and mercy. She is represented by matrilineal relationships. The Warrior. He embodies combat and is represented by a soldier. The Smith. He embodies craftsmanship and is represented by craftsmen and those that create, which in Westeros, more broadly speaking, means the small folk. The Crone. She embodies wisdom and is represented by the elderly. The Maiden. She embodies innocence and is represented by a virgin. And the Stranger. It embodies death and is represented by an outcast. So as we can see, each of the 7 have a very different domain to one another. We can also see in other works of the A Song of Ice and Fire series that they are worshipped in different ways. Thus, each of the 7 would be looking for something different in their champion. However, as stated previously, Aerion didn't choose a trial by 7 to appease the gods. He did it to put the odds of the fight in his favour. This means he didn't choose knights to appease the gods. Rather, he chooses the best warriors, that being the King's Guard, knights that most wouldn't dare harm, that being the Targaryens, and a knight Dunk thought was going to fight for him. While these are good choices for a regular 7-on-7 fight, they are not good choices for a trial by 7. Dunk's party, however, is a completely different matter. He was desperate to find anybody and everybody that would be willing to fight for him, and in doing so, he accidentally created a company of knights that represented each of the 7 gods. Don't believe me? Well then, let's go through each of them. We'll do this by looking at 3 things: their general attributes, how they acted in the tourney, and how they described preparing for the trial in their final moments. First, we'll start with the obvious, Sir Lionel Baratheon, the Laughing Storm. Very clearly, he is the champion of the warrior, as Sir Lionel takes great joy in fighting throughout the tourney, laughing while jousting. He also chooses to fight in the trial, not because he believes in Dunk's cause, but because he doesn't want to miss the chance of fighting in a trial by 7. He is seen preparing for the trial by sharpening his sword. Next, we can look at Sir Robin Riesling, a knight that not only never tells Dunk his reason for fighting alongside him, but never has a line of dialogue in the entire book. The only connection he has to Dunk is that Egg knew him from another tourney. During the jousting in Sir Robin's only tilt, he loses his helm and continues to joust as if to invite death. He prepares for the trial by sitting alone to the side, praying. Sir Robin is the champion of the Stranger. Third, we'll look at Sir Raymond Fossaway, a man who spent the entire tourney as a squire, who was literally knighted minutes before the trial, with this battle being his first time. Instead of spending his last minutes before the fight preparing, he spends it repainting his shield. He is the champion of the Maiden. Fourth, we'll look at Dunk himself. As opposed to all the other knights, he was born as a member of the Smallfolk in the slums of Flea Bottom. He spends most of the tourney trying to get some armor made for him. Hell, he spends most of his time preventing an actual smith or lusting after a puppeteer who is also an artist. The preparation he takes is him donning his armor. Sir Duncan the Tall is the champion of the smith. Fifth is Prince Baelor Targaryen. He is old enough that his hair has started to grey, and there are several instances of Baelor doling out wisdom throughout the book, as almost every time he is mentioned, he is giving someone some advice or some guidance. Throughout the tourney, instead of jousting, he is seen often reading or talking. Baelor spends his preparation time planning their tactics for the trial. Prince Baelor is the champion of the Crone. Finally, we look at Sir Humphrey Harding and Sir Humphrey Beesbury, two knights who share a name and are related through marriage, who tilted in the tourney against one another, and who spent their last moments of preparation chatting with one another. Sir Humphrey Harding joined the trial to seek justice for the death of his horse, while Sir Humphrey Beesbury's sigil is a reference to an animal that brings life to the world. The Humphreys are the champions of the father and the mother. So each of Dunk's 7 has some characteristic and action that lines up with each of the gods. So what? It doesn't mean that the 7 had any influence on the trial itself. Well, to examine that, we must first look at what the trial is actually about and how each of their gods would think about this issue. The issue that is on trial is that Dunk struck a member of the royal family to protect a puppeteer from being injured. So which of the gods would be in favour of Dunk's actions here? The Maiden is the deity of innocent women, and since Dunk was protecting an innocent woman, this would win the Maiden to his side. The Smith is the deity of craftsmen. Also, as I have previously stated, the Smith can be seen as the deity of the Smallfolk themselves. Not only was Tanselle one of the Smallfolk, but she was also an artist too, thus falling entirely under the Smith's protection. The warrior is not only the god of combat, but in using that fighting to protect others. As Dunk was fighting to protect rather than to attack, the warrior would favour him. The stranger is the god of outcasts, of which Dunk most certainly is. He camps far away from the rest of the knights and watches the tourney from the area set aside for the Smallfolk, as he doesn't feel like he belongs with the nobility. He even spends much of the early part of the book trying to find just one person that either knew him or his old mentor. Thus the stranger would look out for him as one of the outcasts. However, believe it or not, there are a few of the gods that would be against Dunk's actions. The father is the god of justice, and no matter how we feel about it, Dunk broke the law. The father wouldn't look at if it was right to strike Aerion under the circumstances, rather that Dunk just did it, and that was violating the law. Thus the father would judge him guilty. The Crone is the goddess of wisdom, and striking a member of the royal family in a fit of rage is not wise. The Crone would not approve of Dunk's actions. Finally, we have the mother. At first glance, you would think that the mother would be for Dunk, as she is the goddess of life and mercy, and Dunk was stopping Aerion from harming life. But she is judging the guilt of Dunk's actions, not Aerion, and Dunk went against the mother's ideals. After stopping Aerion from attacking Tanselle, he keeps kicking him, and even thinks to himself he might have kicked him to death right there and then, but the princeling's men swarmed over him, thus showing Dunk's disregard for mercy and life in that moment. Thus, while the mother isn't siding with Aerion, she would side against Dunk. Now that we have established which knight corresponds to which god, and how each god used the trial, we can see the influence the gods had on the trial. All the gods whose champions were in favour of Dunk's actions lived, while knights whose corresponding gods were against Dunk's actions died. Now, you could try to say this was because Prince Baelor was wearing borrowed armour, Sir Humphrey Harding had a broken leg, Sir Humphrey Beesbury was fighting against a knight of the King's Guard, but Prince Baelor is said to be one of the greatest fighters in Westeros, who also couldn't be harmed by 6 of his opponents for fear of either breaking their oath or being named a kinslayer. Sir Humphrey Harding was observed to be one of the best jousters at the tourney, yet he was badly wounded in the first charge. And Sir Humphrey Beesbury was said to be nearly as good as Harding, breaking 12 lances against him during the tourney, but he was killed in the first charge. And on the other side of the coin, both Dunk and Raymond survived, where they were clearly the least skilled members of their company and the most likely to die. Also, during the trial, there are 2 instances in which characters act in ways beyond their control. Maker states that he cannot remember landing the blow that killed his brother, while Dunk, with a lance hole in one side of his body, having had a horse fall on top of him and a morning star smashing into the side of his head, wounded to the point where he cannot move, manages to find the strength he did not know he had to knock an uninjured Arion off his feet, wrestle his shield off him, and proceed to beat him with it so badly that the shield turns to pieces. While yes, these accounts could be describing adrenaline pumping through someone in a life or death situation, I think I have made my case for the potential of divine intervention by the Seven. To sum up, when Dunk was gathering knights for his trial by 7, he inadvertently chose knights that each represented one of the 7 gods. This caused the gods to intervene with his trial and affect the outcome based on their views of the matter. Ultimately, this caused Dunk to win the trial. So what do you think? Do you think the 7 had a hand in the trial, or were these all coincidences? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you like this video, my next video will be on the personality of Daenerys' dragons. If that's something you'd like to see, subscribe so that you don't miss it. Bye.